Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the studio today. One of these days I'll actually set up these cameras before I actually start, but there we go. I'll just put my gloves on and change my glasses. But good evening. I see everybody seems to be doing well according to the chat anyway. Good evening, McKinnon Porter, and Fear Reaper as well. Good evening. Oh dear. At least today is going a bit better than yesterday. Let's zoom in, but that's where we got to last night. And I've got a reference picture around here which I need to look at. Yeah. Right, so to excuse me, shall have a drink of tea. I need got a frog in my throat. Got kind of two main things to do. Need to put some probably grass on both sides of the cottage so that it ties the cottage to the horizon. McKinnon Porter, thank you very much for following. That's very kind of you, and I do appreciate everybody that follows. You can go there. Thank you very much. So we need to tie the cottage to the horizon, which is somewhere around this sort of, I mean, it's a sort of about eye line, so we had it about there. That's roughly where we figured we were standing wise. Probably grass. I need to do something down here to fill this space in. And this roof is still rather coarse looking. I think I probably want to do a little bit more work on it, but we're not far, relatively speaking, from finishing. But that is a relative statement, not an absolute statement. Excuse me a moment. My wife just wants to ask me a question. Okay, back with this. So, sort of grass in there. I need to do something about this building. I was sort of copying an idea from at least one of the reference pictures, the one that's there. As you, if my pointer doesn't go in front of it, but sort of at the bottom end of this building, it's kind of falling away a little bit. It seemed like a nice touch, so I tried to incorporate some of that, but it's only partially successful. So I need to do something on that. So we'll work on that first. And go from there. So in using the reference picture, what I've done here is sort of mortars missing, so one thing I want to do is just make sure the stones here are a little bit more prominent than they are. Because at the moment they're kind of somewhat dull, hidden, low contrast, and not fantastically noticeable. Right, so now that I've got those stones, okay, I'm going to put some mortar between them in sort of a falling out sort of shape, sort of thing. So I'm going to do this, and I want it to be quite light, really. I wonder if I should put another stone in there. I'll tell you what I will do. Let's make this stone a little bit bigger. I don't like such a big gap, actually. So similarly on that side, I didn't really like the big gap. It just looked a bit too big. So now then, let's. And now I want to put some mortar in, but make it light, very well light. Light scratches, therefore it looks darker, and that means it'll look like it goes sort of into the background. And then we get lighter as we get sort of closer around here. I don't want this area back here to be totally black, so I just want a couple of scratches. But it kind of just looks a little bit as though something's missing, which is what I was after. That's kind of too far away. That stone itself is kind of too far away from the others. I'll have a think about what to do about that in a minute. Over at this side here, this is, yeah, again, it doesn't look right. I think I need another stone in here, so I'm going to put one in. It looked like too big a gap between what I perceive as the ground and this set of stones here. Let's make, just while I'm working on this, I'm going to move the camera in a little bit so you're not looking at it from too far a distance away. Okay, I'm thinking about grass and stuff around here. Sort of hard-packed soil in which we've got some grass growing around it. Very much like the idea is from the reference. It seems like a good idea. So I'm just thinking about the best way to do that. And I don't really know, so I think what we'll probably do is just go and do it and see what happens. So I kind of want longish sort of grass. Whereas we had little short grass around here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put clumps of grass. Sort of overlapping the stones and anything else that's in the way, basically, because they're in front of it. what we will do is we will paint this grass. I don't really want to go too mad with it. Just want sort of some rough patches of grass, you know, just odd bits of grass that's around the place. We might put a little bit sort of a small grass in amongst it. So we've got just like clumps of grass around there like that. Kind of not going in the path itself because it's walked, seems to be walked on a lot, so that's going to keep the grass down and pack the soil amongst these stones. I think that's kind of what I've done there. And I will get, as I mentioned, I'll get the green ink out and we'll actually paint some of this grass, I think. Don't know about all of it, but some of it certainly. Seems like a good idea. There's a big area here to fill in. I'm going to do that with sort of some grass clumps. We will also fill in what's amongst it as well with just random grass. A little bit sparse. This isn't really a lawn on this side. It's just self-seeded grass. So small grass blades, so I'm using small scratches. Just to represent it. It wouldn't look particularly right if I tried to use great big long scratches for small grass strokes. Okay, and now I'm going to do is somehow put some sort of background in here which is fairly dark. It's sort of soil, packed sort of soil, but not heavily walked on soil, so it's going to be somewhat pale, light. I tend to reverse colours, so when I talk about pale, which is lighter, I mean dark, and when I talk about dark, I'm meaning light, because this is kind of working in reverse. I'm painting things to make them lighter rather than painting things to make them darker, which is what you might do with a paintbrush, a pencil or something like that. You go over something to make it darker. When you're doing Scraperboard, you go over something to make it lighter, and it's kind of, you're still kind of thinking the same terms of going over something makes it darker, but the darker bit is white. Total Ninja Kit Kat, good evening, welcome back to the studio. Nice to see you again, and thank you very much. I'm glad that's the impression you're getting. I will admit to this being only the third scraper board art that I've ever done. So I don't know whether that makes it better or worse. But thank you very much for your comment. Now I think I'm going to try sort of a cartoon or an illustration sort of trick, and that is, instead of making it like these stones fully filled in type of idea, I am just going to sort of put odd scratches randomly in this area. That sort of makes it look solid, but without giving it any real sort of brightness or lightness. You can see it's there, or you certainly I can see it in person. When you look at it, if you can see now, you can see there are some vague scratches there. That's kind of enough to take that black deep hole effect out of it and just make it look like it's something dark that you can't really see too well. And that's something I'd have done with a pencil drawing if I'd thought of it. So I'm applying it now to using Scraperboard, because it does seem that quite a few techniques go cross media. So what I might do with a pencil seems to work reasonably well in Scraperboard, provided you remember the fact that you haven't got great big thick white, well, I suppose you have got great big thick white pencils, but the sort of the range of cross hatching that you can do, you can't shade like you would do with a pencil, you can cross hatch like you would do with a pencil. So, but provided you remember that, it seems like a lot of the techniques do seem to cross over. And here I have to go try being random again. Yeah, that looks like it'll do me, at least for the moment. We might decide to do something. How long have I been working on this project? I think about 2 2 weeks. I actually don't know to be certain. I'm just thinking back now. I think it's about 2 weeks. That seems an awfully long time for what I've done here, though. So I've not been particularly rushing, to be honest. I think I've certainly been doing it more than 7 or 8 days. So we're probably talking at least sort of 16, 17 hours minimum at the moment. Because if I say sort of 7 or 8 days, it sounds an awfully long time, but when I'm only sort of doing 2 hours a night, then it sort of accumulates a bit slower. So I'm going to put some. I need to connect the horizon into this, so I'm going to put some grass down the side here, which I will colour green. But what I want to do with the grass is, like anything, when you draw things that are distant, they want to be lighter, so that they're kind of a misty colour. Often as you go further away, stuff tends to get lighter in sort of colours, and so to give that sort of going away feeling, I will need to make sure that we get lighter as we go away. Now if I paint it green, there is an element of control in how much I paint. As you can see, some of this grass around here has got different shades. That's just how much ink I left on the surface when it dried. So I can do some of that, and I probably will want to go over it with scraping some of it as well, because if I add some white back in, that will make it lighter as well. But unfortunately, doing grass is lots and lots of little tiny scratches. And especially in the background here, because you wouldn't see individual grass grass blades right in the distance. So I kind of need to make it, I don't want to make it a solid white, which you kind of want to do, despite the fact that that would be lighter. But we've got this very strange phenomenon, if you like, with Scraperboard, or black background monochrome objects, where you're working black as the background. And that is, whilst we talk about stuff in the background being lighter, which is true, than stuff in the foreground, if I make this white, it will look to be right in your face. It's a weird sort of thing. It kind of reverses the colours or the way things work. And yet if I made it darker green, for example, it wouldn't look right. It's something about the white that does this. I don't fully understand it, but I just work with it. So I kind of want to give it, going in the background here, like a texture. So you do, you kind of understand it's grass in the background. I mean, some of that is, you'll see some of the grass, like I've done down here, some of the grass blades here, and therefore you will understand that it goes backwards. But also equally you'll sort of be looking for a sort of a grass blade texture in the distance, if that makes sense. Now of course things like grass blades here are really exaggerated in a way, because at the distance that you stood to see this cottage, which may be sort of 20-30 feet across, these grass blades are sort of fairly ginormous grass blades, but it looks like a lawn, and that's another silly phenomenon, that your brain can assimilate things that are completely out of scale, but your brain expects, because your brain expects them to be a lawn, it sees them in scale, even though they're not. It's a very weird thing. It happens a lot with people who do, people who make scale models see that thing a lot. Sometimes they have to do things completely out of scale, at the wrong scale, in order for them to look right. Your brain just does something weird. Beanie Ween, good evening. Thank you very much for that nice comment, and welcome to the studio. Actually, I should move this over here so you can actually see what I'm doing. I'm out of frame again. I'll move it over. So I am just doing a lawn. Oh, that's certainly grass here in the background. It's a very painstaking set of very small scratches. I won't say one blade of grass at a time, because this sort of distance there'd be hundreds, but it's a case of giving you the impression that it is a lawn, and whilst in practice you should not be able to see individual grass blades at this sort of distance, the fact that you do here, when you look at it in person, won't look odd. I'm trying to be quite light as well, as I mentioned earlier. The background, as you go further away, colours become more muted and lower contrast to the background, so that's kind of what I'm doing here. If I was doing this in full colour, these colours would be lighter and mistier. Because I'm doing this in black and white, I'm reducing the contrast, so the contrast is about as low as I can make it with my skill level at the moment. Now, if you are watching and thinking, boy, isn't that going slowly? Yes, it is. That's what has to happen sometimes when you're trying to do an artistic piece of some kind. Tricky Ninja, good evening. I believe you've been in before as well. Good evening, welcome back to the studio. Thank you very much. This is an area where digital art does have an advantage, because you could, like in Paint Shop for example, or even Painter, define a brush which had a whole section of this in, and then you just randomly use that brush, and it would take seconds, if you already had the brush defined, to actually do this area. But physically, when you're working physically, you can't actually take advantage of those sorts of things. There are other ways of doing it, or doing things in rapid succession using different tools if they happen to suit what it is you're trying to do. Small wire brushes, for example, would create lots of scratches all at the same time as would something like a fiberglass pencil, but unfortunately it wouldn't give this sort of look. That sort of thing is not welcome here. Thank you very much. If you're trying to shock me, you ain't even trying very hard, and so there's no need for it. Bye bye. No, I'm not going to draw trees in this one. I don't particularly think it adds much in this particular case. I could do so. I could have framed the picture using trees. I've kind of decided I'd rather not bother in this particular case. Two reasons for that: it just didn't seem aesthetically to need it. I know the reference picture has trees there, and they've been well framed, but I didn't feel I needed to do it for this piece, and also that adds another level of complexity, and this being the third piece that I've ever done, I decided I'd make it simpler and do away with the complexity. Practice trees on another piece. Thank you very much. Okay, Beanie Ween, I'm not about to click that link, partly because I suspect what it might be. Would you like to tell me what it is? And if it's not what you say it is, you'll get banned. Because I don't particularly like people who post links without asking. Thank you, Fear Reaper. Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. People who post links like that, just like that, are usually. But the daft thing is, I think they're expecting me to be shocked in some way. I'm 50 odd years old. They don't stand a chance. Not at all. Uh, I won't say I've seen it all, but it's, you know, there's lots of stuff out there that's not very pleasant to look at, and there's lots of stuff out there that, fine, people like that sort of thing. That's up to them. Not the sort of thing I choose to look at, but it doesn't shock. It just becomes kind of boring. And the people that try to do something like that to get some sort of reaction, it's just kind of boring. Now, if these people watch, say, some of the health and safety videos that they show to construction crews, for example, they'd be shocked. They'd be voiding the contents of their stomach all over the place. Fluffy Twiggler, thank you very much, and welcome to the studio this evening. I'm afraid it's lots and lots of grass at the moment, so it's going to take a little bit of. It's not progressing very well. It's progressing fast, but in very fast in a small area. I wish I could think of a way of doing this grass quickly, or at least, yeah, quickly. I don't mind doing it slowly, just sometimes I just like it to progress a little bit more rapidly. And also at this stage I'm kind of, because I'm relatively close to a finished piece, I kind of don't want to experiment too much to see if I can find something that might do it. Now as I get closer towards the path here, I can start using slightly larger scratches and making them a little bit lighter. A little bit more random as well, so they don't look, it doesn't look like a straight up and down row of soldiers at attention. Now, all the way down here, all of these scratches are overlapping the previous ones that are above it, so that you don't actually really see a join at any point. And of course, if you were to imagine how the grass grows, that's exactly what you'd see, is each grass blade overlapping the ones behind it. Still trying to be really random. I don't want to place them at a particular interval or of a particular length. So just really trying to be as random as possible, which is quite difficult. You're back, Fear Reaper. Well, I shall say this only once. To paraphrase the television programme, I would say I would highly recommend that you give up smoking. Whether you do or not, it's up to you. But that's the last I'll say on it. Well, I should have done, shouldn't I? I should have got maybe the Scraperboard kit that I've got out whilst you're away, and then when you come back, you'd be going, "What have I missed?" I'm still, even though the grass blades would get longer as you get closer, I still don't really want to make them too prominent. The idea, of course, is that you're going to see the cottage. The green will kind of frame it. This is sort of a little bit of a feature look in a way because of the fact it kind of looks like a lawn. The green scratches that I've got here, the tufts of grass, we'll paint those green as well, as a way of just sort of funneling the eye inwards a little bit. Fair enough. I'm not going to tell you what to do for your Reaper. You know, it's your choice. People enjoy drinking. Alcohol is poisonous. I don't mind a drink occasionally, so I'm not going to say anything from that perspective. Personally, the only thing I specifically have against smoking is actually both my wife and I. My wife has like an asthma effect to the smoke, and I have kind of like an allergic reaction. So we keep out of places where there is any, and that's it. Okay. I really am not trying to tell anybody what to do, but that sort of thing sort of kind of amuses me, because that sort of statement, because I can make it a silly extreme and go, well, I can jump in front of a bus, because other people that have jumped in front of a bus have died because of they've, I don't know, they had a heart attack or something. So jumping in front of a bus isn't going to kill you. But I'm being silly, and you're perfectly right. They do. What's the old saying? You pays your money and you takes your choice. Yeah, it's alright, Phoebe, but you know, as I say, I really wasn't. I'm not going to have a go at anybody for doing it. I'll just say, I think it's a good idea, which I think it's a good idea. Whether you do, it's your choice. I'm not going to ban you or anything like that just because we don't agree. If everybody agreed with the same thing, then it'd be a different world. So, yeah, you carry on if you want to. I was just, well, I am kind of laughing at myself because I was just thinking then, um, if I banned everybody that didn't do something or did something I didn't think that they should, I was thinking I'd never have any viewers. But then I thought, who am I kidding? If that was the case, I wouldn't be banning anybody. Because I don't, people should do what they want to do. Actually, I do ban people who don't do what I think they should. Like those persons a little bit earlier in the stream, so. If I banned one of them, you timed the other one out, which is fine. Right, we've almost finished this section here. When I was doing this one, I was half jokingly thinking I should have counted every single grass blade that I did, but I never bothered. I could have done that here and I haven't bothered either. Yeah. Oh, that's good. I assume you mean a game and not a render. Or, I was going to say, I assume you mean a render or a film. Not a game, but the film, yeah. I've never really had an interest actually in watching them, to be honest. kind of been aware, shall we say, aware of them for a long time. Aware of the story for a long time, because I used to have contact with actually with the communications firm that was called Gandalf, of course, who talked to many things or many people, which is where the name came from. So I was kind of aware of the the Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth and things like that, and being that I kind of like the old style adventure games, like the original Dungeon, I forget what it was called now, and things like Zork and stuff like that, which were seemed to be, shall we say, based off the Tolkien stories. But I've never been particularly interested in it myself. Mind you, there again, I was going to say it's. I don't watch a lot of films, so the film itself wouldn't particularly trigger me. And when I'm reading the books I sort of read, I tend to prefer science fiction rather than things like the Tolkien fiction. Yeah, no, I'm not. Other than adverts, if you like, I've not seen any of them at all. And I know some people, well, a lot of people say they're really good, but I say they just don't really. I suppose they're the kind of thing that if they were on and I was sat on the cinema or on television or just on just playing, and I was sat there doing something, I'd probably watch them, but I wouldn't sort of give up and go away specifically unless it's something else to do. So from that point of view, they're in that sort of list of I don't mind them. But no, as I say, it's science fiction really is my sort of thing, or I suppose space opera type of things. I don't specifically enjoy hard science fiction. It's always science fiction that has some sort of story behind it. So it's not science fiction just for the sake of it, where somebody's just sort of showing off things. I mean, it's sort of typically, if you like, Star Trek, which isn't pure science fiction. It's a story where there is science fiction, if you see what I mean. It's just part of the natural. Yeah, you can plug it. And one of the Dragon, which I did, which was for Man McCaffrey, that's science fiction as well, but they don't hit you in the face with the science fiction. It's people, they're living on other planets, they're using fantastical gadgets, but it's just part of the story. It's not the point of the story. I'm not fantastically into sort of historical fiction either, and in some ways that's probably the style that I imagine Lord of the Rings to be, or the trilogy to be. It's kind of like, I know it's fictional, but it's kind of like a historical recreation, and they're just not something which I have much of an interest in for some reason. But there again, if everybody liked everything the same thing, then life may well be somewhat more boring. We suddenly run out of things to say very quickly, wouldn't we? Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like Star Trek better. It's I don't exactly know what it is, but Star Wars seems to be more, hey, this is science fiction and we'll tell you a story around it, where Star Trek seems to be you're watching people just go about living their lives, and they happen to use, phasers and transporters and have, a medical technology that makes everybody else sort of look like they're in the Dark Ages and stuff like that, and ships that travel faster than light. Yeah, that's right, he does. I used to, I used to read a lot of the Star Trek books, and when Star Wars, I think the first Star Wars film that ever came out was more story based. I used to read a lot of the. Now I want these two at this site to sort of line up. I used to read a lot of the books, but very quickly I kind of got bored with reading the books because they were that, let's show off science fiction and try and think of something to fit story wise. I was just thinking then, so some of the other Anna Caffrey stuff that I like, which is to do with she calls it, or it was called the Talent series, to do with people that use telepathy and telekinesis, and that's another one that's about people, but they're doing sort of some fairly extraordinary things. Some of the other authors, Charles Sheffield was one. I can remember one of the stories is that Charles Sheffield told was Web Between the Worlds, which was essentially the whole story was about a beanstalk, space elevator, but effectively most of the story had got nothing to do with it. It was to do with a couple of the characters within the book, and at the end of it there was a beanstalk on Earth, and they'd built it during the course of the book, but it by no means was it the focus of the book. Let me turn a little bit of light on here. Quite a few people have said, "Oh, that's an interesting one." I've watched all 5. The one I'm least one I least enjoy, shall we say, has been the not the original, but the first one with the Jonathan Archer character. So the one that I was about to say done most recently, but that very early Star Trek series with Scott Beluga. I watched about half the series and then I didn't bother from there on in. But the other four, the original Next Gen, DS9 and Voyager, I watched all of them. They each have a different. I kind of like all of them, really, to be honest. I think obviously the original series was somewhat made somewhat more cheaply, shall we say, which kind of shows in a way, and therefore the other ones were better visually, but you know they kept the same stories and the style of stories and things, which made them equally as good. And some of the crossovers have been really interesting. I'm not sure I'd put one in front of the other. They kind of all had different sort of a different. I can't really say theme, but a different style of telling the same sort of stories, and different mechanisms of doing it. I mean, things like the Voyager, of course, which threw them to the other quadrant, so they were on their own. You know, they could tell stories from that perspective. You know, being complete strangers in a foreign land. DS9, of course, was the static. It was all in one place, so it gave you a different thing. Enterprise was the one I kind of only watched half the first series of. I haven't seen anything of the rest. And of course the original and Next Gen kind of the same thing, but it's almost as though you got three rather than four. You got three. I mean, the original series Next Gen was sort of like a continuation of the same story in a way, and then Deep Space Nine and Voyager were two different themes of the same sort of overall universe. So I find it really hard to say I've got a favourite out of them. I mean, I think almost to some extent it's a bit like Doctor Who. It's who's your favourite Doctor Who. It tends to be the one that you saw first. And I mean, I think anybody that sort of watched the original series can't fail to have tried to do that. You know, that was when that was on, that was the thing that everybody was trying to do, and especially if you could do it with both hands, which I can, and then I can have fun by splitting the fingers. But your Voyager's your favourite. I tell you what I enjoy about all of them, and that's the music, the theme tunes. I think the theme tunes are absolutely fantastic for all four of them, really. They've got some real sort of soaring sounds, if you like, that are real hope for the future, and it's the Borg certainly are the most frightening in a way. Captain Dobie, good evening, welcome to the studio this evening. Just purely because they're the unstoppable enemy in a way, aren't they? They just take over, and it's kind of like you're still there, but you're one of them then, and it's Oh, I think you're right. It was a fantastic. She was a fantastic actress playing that role. The fact it was, the captain was a female was again sort of something which almost was unheard of when it was done in a way. and yet it fits perfectly with the Star Trek universe. Well, I'm going to say if you've watched Next Generation, you've watched at least part of one episode of the original series, because of course the one where the Tribbles and Q, I think it was involved, took them back to and they used some of the original series, so they integrated the two. It's quite fantastic. ICQTB, welcome. Good evening again. Nice to see you back. I haven't seen all of the films either for Star Trek though. I think I watched about the first 4, and then certainly the ones I haven't seen are the early Spock and Kirk films. I've not actually seen any of that. I've seen the odd clip, but I've not seen any of those films either, which is the sort of what I knew of the storylines, I guess, or whatever it was, just didn't grab me, which is kind of odd, because the first 3-4 films I went to see as soon as they came out almost. See if I can give this a little bit of a sharpen. Any particular reason why you haven't watched the first one? No, is it so no desire to watch it, or just not the opportunity? I still read the occasional Star Trek book as well. They at one time I used to actually, I will say, collect the Star Trek books for all. Well, I stopped collecting the books when I got an electronic reader, but there probably at the time was only the original and the Next Gen series, and possibly a few of the DS9 books, but I used to read every single book, and then and still have quite a few of them actually, because I used to read them multiple times, but then I've stopped reading the books as well. Mind you, that's partly because with I've got a Kindle, so there's that many books out there to read that are fascinating and what have you, that I don't tend to sort of read lots of series. Okay, it's if you'd have been there to watch it live, when it was coming out, so to speak, it was way ahead of everything. There's as we were talking about earlier, they when the whole all the acting, if you like, was so out of so much different to science fiction as it was around that time. Some of the earlier science fiction, somebody would pick up I don't know, something like a phaser, for example, but start explaining how it worked. And it's kind of like, why would they do that? And yet on Star Trek, they picked it up and shot somebody. And they never mentioned how it worked or anything like that. So, so it was such a complete departure from the way science fiction had been portrayed. And yes, it was all, it was rubber-suited monsters and flimsy backdrops and that sort of thing, and shooting in quarries. But it was so different at the time that it was an amazing thing. I guess once you've seen the others and you start looking back, then you start to see that sort of, as you say, old-fashioned, unreal looking. But if you sort of can sort of put yourself in the mind of this is the first time you've seen anything like that, then it was it sort of had you glued to the television when it was broadcast. I'm trying to think if we had video recorders back then. Probably yes, we did. We would have done, but it was one of those. It's what that gets called appointment programs. You actually made the time to sit down to watch it. You made sure that you were there. You'd had your tea or whatever it was, so you could actually watch it. There were some really interesting stories as well. I think in some ways they had more varied stories than Next Gen did. Actually, I can't remember. Yeah, Next Gen was a little bit longer, wasn't it? So I guess they ultimately had to repeat some things. I mean, obviously Q got there was a lot in Next Gen, so there was quite a lot of stories with him. Whereas I don't think particularly in the original series you ever saw. I suppose the Klingons maybe, and the Romulans were about the only persistent enemy that they had. Have you ever heard the not the latest remake, but the original War of the Worlds? The that's an amazingly well done, but quite a scary audio. Because the way it was broadcast at the time, a lot of people thought it was. I can't actually remember if I was old enough to have heard the original, but well, thank you for the compliment, ICQT. I would of course encourage you to copy them. You know, it's some of them are just just practice, but all of them are should hopefully be possible for anybody to do. I don't particularly think of myself as being energetic. I know what you mean, though. It's the getting started bit. Once you get started, it's fine. You only saw the movie. I actually haven't seen the War of the Worlds movie. Again, it's one I kind of had. Well, I kind of had no interest in. That's not true, because I kind of did have an interest in it, but it was kind of like the audio's got better pictures, if that makes sense. I'd sort of already seen the film in a way, and I know the film will be completely completely different to whatever I imagined, but that was was kind of the rationale that I had in my mind when the film was around. And there's quite some back there. There's quite some scary movies. I mean, Day of the Triffid. That's quite a terrifying story. Thank you, Fear Reaper. I do seem to be inspiring a few people to actually start doing things that they weren't doing before, and trying out art, which is absolutely fantastic. If they didn't do it, or taking it back up if they did. I'm certainly glad you did take it back up. I've still got those two to do something with them, but I've got those two amazing videos, and I will hopefully get some chance to insert into the stream somehow. I'm just working on the website at the moment, which I want to get finished before I do anything else stream-wise, but it's an interesting thing, ICQTB, because I don't find you need patience to do this. Now, maybe we have different definitions of patience, or different ways in which we express or experience patience, but I find making the ring jewellery, for example, I find I need more patience to do that than to do something like this. Even though this, I can do a bracelet in an hour, and this takes several days, but my experience of patience is I need patience when something isn't going how I want it to go. I'm making a mess of it. I keep retrying the same thing. That's when I need patience. Doing something like this, I'm doing thousands of little tiny scratches, but I'm making progress, and when I'm making progress, I don't find that needing patience. In fact, sometimes you just get lost in it, and time just vanishes. I mean, I've done that side and some grass and stuff down here and this side, and we've spent an hour and 3/4. Okay, I've been talking, so I tend to stop doing that when I'm talking. But I don't think of what I'm doing as requiring patience. There's kind of a, stamina is a little bit of a strong word to it, but I do sometimes get bored with doing something, and then I'll just move and do something else. When I was doing these stones, I'd get bored in an area and I'd go and do a different area. But that's kind of not patience. I've had enough doing that now. I want to do something different. But doing the rings, for example, is if it won't quite go in, you train really hard and then it drops out the pliers, or you get the ring in and it drops off. Another one drops off onto the table, or it goes on the floor, and you've tried getting that ring through 5 times, and you get it through and then it falls and it's messed up, and you have to pick it up and try again. And you get that's when I need patience, and that's when what I experience is kind of like a toe curling. You get intense, and that's the patience bit. Almost the build up to rage quitting, if you see what I mean. But then I just go, hang on a minute, I'm curling my toes. Deep breath, relax, sit back maybe for a couple of minutes, and then carry on. So I don't actually find that. So 2 hours on something like this just disappears, really does. So I kind of would encourage you to try something, and just see. You might find the same thing. I think a lot of people do the same thing. I don't have the patience to do that because they don't realise that you lose yourself in it, in a way. You just lose perception of time. I mean, imagine something that you do that you like doing, and I don't know, I'll just make something up, like watching a particular, we were talking about movies and Star Trek there and shows. Watching your favourite TV program. You sit down and you start watching it, and then all of a sudden it's finishing, and you kind of like go, well, that was really quick. And yet, half an hour's gone by that quickly that you've just been so absorbed in it you haven't realised it's gone. And this does tend, whatever it is, does tend to be the same. And I have noticed a couple of other streamers say exactly the same sort of thing. So you might be surprised. You do think it takes quite a bit of time to do theory, but do you feel the same thing, or do you think you do need a patience to actually to do something that takes a while to come to completion? I think rather than patience, sometimes there's almost the reverse, a level of impatience. Like doing this is going really slowly to do this area, and I've done a half an inch, and I've got another 2 inches here to do, and that's going to take another couple of hours to do, or whatever. And there's kind of, I wish I could do it faster, type of thing, but That's kind of more impatience rather than needing patience. Because ultimately I just go, well, it's going to take as long as it's going to take, but because that is something which beginners to quite a few of the art forms that I do, like airbrushing for example, or maybe this, or the pyrography, they think, they get in their mind that it should be going faster, and therefore they do things which ultimately occasionally may work but ultimately sort of tend to spoil what they've done, and then they're disappointed in what they've done, and they kind of attribute it to the patience, thing. And quite often it's more that they have been conditioned to expect it to be faster, by simple, well, in some cases by, for example, a time lapse. Seeing a time lapse, a lot of the pyrography, if you watch it on YouTube, is all time lapsed, and so you see a whole picture this size or bigger done in 30 minutes, and you kind of think it should be that, and yet it's probably been time lapsed at something like 50 or 60 to 1 and you're looking at 30 or 40 hours worth of work in that 30 minutes. Yeah, same sort of thing. I think you kind of get engrossed in it. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean that's kind of ICQTB. That kind of ties in a way. The quick results to something. But if you think about your you wood modelling, or hacking, carving, I assume you mean knife carving. When you get to a point where you've got the basic outline of something, and then you start adding details, because I kind of imagine that if you were modelling a building, you don't just want a block of wood. It's two by 3 block of wood, cut off, so 2 inches tall. There's your building. I'm sure you're not into that sort of rapid wood modelling, shall we say. There's more detail in there. Yeah, and with your knife carving, if you're doing knife carving, so maybe something like pulling a spirit out of a wood, a spirit face, something like that. It happens quickly, but as you put more detail into it, it takes a bit longer. Now, yes, it's a quick art form to do, or can be to do, especially if you're more experienced. There was I've forgotten who it was that was doing the chip carving. Potentially, that's a quick art form, but the more you put into it, the longer it takes. So, I mean, I can't wood sort of knife carve at the moment, and I'm not particularly wood modelling, other than building model aircraft out of balsa. But I've never particularly tried wood modelling, and my knife carving skills are rudimentary. So when I see somebody, perhaps like yourself, that can take a block of wood with a knife and turn it into something in about 30 minutes, I'm kind of jealous. And yet I know it's practice. You've had the practice and you can do it quickly because of that. If I try it, it'll take me 3 or 4 days. Or if I'm talking, probably about 6 weeks. Yeah. See, because you've built up your experience over time, you're really fast at something that I would spend a long time doing. Actually, there's an example just crossed my mind, and that is if I just dig it out from here. Assuming it is here. Is that looking? Yeah. Is that it? Oh, I know where I've put it. I kind of, this was pyrography that I did in an hour. So that was a small piece that took me an hour. Kind of because I'd had some practice, and I was time limiting myself to do it, and yet, we had the I can't show it, I'd have to zoom the camera out, but we've got this piece, which of course took considerably longer. And potentially I could have done this a lot faster than I did it, but it was kind of fun to do and take my time over. And it wasn't any sort of difference in patience required to do it, really. I mean, in some ways you can also look at it as, this piece is what, if you look at the size, there's going to be what, 4 or 5, about 25 times, or the big one's about 25-30 times more than this smaller one, and the smaller one took an hour, the bigger one took 30-40 hours. It kind of matches, and I suspect some of your carving there, if you did it on something 10 times bigger, would take 10 times as long. But I also suspect that you wouldn't really be thinking you needed the extra patience to do that 10 times as long. You can. That's you've already got you've already got the mentality of knowing that you need to practice. You know with your carving how much better you got from the first time you ever tried it to what you can do now. So the fact that you've got that means that were you to try and do something like pyrography, that when you start you're not going to be producing the equivalent of a Rembrandt on your first try, and that just as you learnt with carving, that you'll make some mistakes and you'll mess some pieces up and you'll start again. And that makes, the fact that you can already do something like the carving gives you a tremendous advantage to doing something new like pyrography or something like this, because you've got that inbuilt acknowledgement that you're not going to be perfect immediately, and you need to practice, and you're not going to be disappointed because you need to practice, which is somebody who's just tries something for the first time. That's one of the big hurdles to overcome, is they think they should produce something like this as their very first piece that they ever did. I'm not saying this is good or bad, but they have in their mind that they want to do this, and they make a mess of it, and they get really disappointed, and they stop. Whereas if you've already know you have to practice, then you go, okay, I know I needed more practice, so that's life. I've had a little bit more practice, and you work from there. So I think you could. Or at least you could have a serious attempt at doing it. And as well, I can say quite a few people say the same thing, I guess, is if you never try, you'll never do it. If you try, you're either going to succeed or fail. So if you try, you've already got a 25% chance of succeeding, which is a heck of a lot better than not trying at all. And yes, I know that means you've got a 75% chance of failing, but that's still better than a 100% chance of failing if you don't try. Yeah, give it a chance. The worst that will happen is that the piece of wood that you use, you decide isn't good enough to keep, so you throw it away. You have consumed a piece of wood. That's the worst that can happen. But you had a bit of fun trying it. Okay, you might get a bit frustrated, but you had a bit of fun trying it. You've had a bit of practice, and it's consumed a bit of wood. Yeah, I'm assuming you already have a pyro tool, so it's not like you're spending a lot of money to get tools and then find out you don't like it or something like that. But you know, and I know I'm saying, yeah, you've consumed a bit of wood, which for me is one of the hardest things I have to get over, because I don't like, in quotes, wasting material. So I always want to have something worthwhile to do something on, and I hate wasting material. So I kind of wouldn't get one of these scratch boards and just try making scratch marks on it just to see what they did, because I would personally, I kind of see that as wasting materials. And yet, how would I learn what a tool is going to do? But I sort of would, my style or my thing is, okay, I'm going to pick something that I may not be able to do, and I'll learn what the tools do by, I say, oh, I think it'll do this, so I'll try it. Oh, well, it didn't work. Then, previously I'd have been disappointed. In fact, streaming has helped me a lot in that it's done, okay, I've made a mistake. I'll either fix it, or ultimately I'll just say, too bad. I've learnt a lot from streaming to be, I don't wait for the perfect thing. I just go, like I did with this. Hey, that's a nice picture. Let's see if I can do something like that. And I am learning a heck of a lot to just go, well, alright, this board may be a couple of quid, £2, $3, €2.50, something like that, a board. I've had a couple of hours fun from using it. If I seriously mess this up, then I'd probably use the rest of the board just to try out some other tools to see what they did with. It's a cheap way of spending 2 hours. You've had some fun. Well, I will look forward to hearing either at the weekend or next week sometime whether you did actually try and what you thought about continuing with it, ICQTB. And if you ever decide to stream you doing any of this stuff, let me know, because I'd certainly be interested in watching if time zones and stream times and things like that matched up. Well, yeah, that's right, Fury, but you go for it. It's now what, 5 past, nearly 10 past 10. It's about time I normally stop. I'm not going to be able to finish that in any sort of short period of time. So we'll leave continuing the grass down to somewhere down here until tomorrow night, when we'll use some more green ink on these, and perhaps then do some more scratching over the top of the green ink. And then we're relatively close to finishing. I said I want maybe to do a little bit more with the roof a little bit. It's still a little bit too rough for me. I'd like the sort of the way the roof is strikes me as well. And it's sort of similar in the reference as well. It strikes me as an oldish sort of roof, you know, with the bits falling off, and that's kind of how I've represented it. You can see the sort of the reeds sort of, they're no longer nice and clean and straight, and they're sort of draping off the sides. So the roof's a relatively old one. This kind of like strikes me as almost brand new, in that you can almost see the individual reeds. So I kind of want to sort of take away some of the sort of fairly sharp scratches that are there, soften it up a little bit, so it looks a little bit more sort of older and you know, moss covered, or at least not quite as pristine a thing. But apart from that, we probably getting quite close to being able to say, you know what, that'll do. I know I probably want to do something in the windows, if only to indicate there's glass in there, and that might just be sort of a squiggle in the middle of each pane, or maybe some sort of reflection of the grass perhaps, I'm not sure. I think I'll probably go for simpler rather than reflections. So, but it could be sort of just a light scraping so that they look slightly grey, but I'm not sure. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is say thank you everybody for watching this evening. It's been great fun. Quite an interesting set of discussions as well. If there's anybody watching that isn't following, then of course I do encourage you to do so. I do appreciate everybody that does. It's absolutely fantastic to know people want to come back and see what you're doing again. If you'd just like to be notified when I'm live, and Twitch doesn't always do that very successfully, then you are welcome to follow me on Twitter. It's @ZerriganArt, and if you can't recall that, it is below the stream window, and it'll be on the end plate in a moment. And alternatively, if you just want to try and catch me, my next stream should be tomorrow evening at 8 PM in the UK, which is roughly the same time every night of the week. That's 1900 hours GMT, or about 2 hours 10 minutes ago in whatever time zone you're currently in. That was 8 PM UK time, so it'll be that time tomorrow. Thank you all, have a good evening, and hope you have a go at pyrography, ICQTB, and it's an old building, so some cracks. Maybe for your Reaper, it's probably a good idea. It kind of almost does have a slightly abandoned feel, especially with the door wide open. You could be right, don't know, we'll have a see. I'll have to have a look at broken windows and see just how they get represented. Thank you all, good night.